The Revolt of Saint Titus was a 14th-century rebellion against the Republic of Venice in the Venetian colony of Crete. The rebels overthrew the official Venetian authorities and attempted to create an independent state, declaring Crete a republic under the protection of Saint Titus, the Republic of Saint Titus. Crete under Venice. Crete had been under Venetian rule since 1211, having been sold to Venice by Boniface of Montferrat at the time of the Fourth Crusade. Owing to its central location along the trade routes, its size and its products, Crete had a strategic importance for the Venetian rule in the eastern Mediterranean. Occupied Crete was divided into fiefs, and a colony known as the Kingdom of Candia had been established, having as capital the city of Candia. The land was distributed to Venetian colonists on the condition that they paid taxes, manned Venetian warships and defended the possession in the name of the motherland. The Venetians ruled Crete primarily for their own interest, driving Cretans to forced labor or conscripting them for the wars of the Republic. During the 5 centuries of Venetian rule, Crete saw 14 rebellions against Venice. That of Saint Titus was the first in which the Latin colonists were actively involved. The revolt. Venice demanded its colonies make large contributions to its food supply and the maintenance of its large fleets. On 8 August 1363, Latin feudatories in Candia were informed that a new tax, aimed to support the maintenance of the city's port, was to be imposed on them by the Venetian Senate. As the tax was viewed more beneficial to the Venetian merchants rather than to the landowners, there was strong objection among the feudatories. The news quickly reached the ears of Leonardo Dandolo, the Duke of Candia. After being informed about the feudatories' attitude, Dandolo summoned before him 20 of them and insisted that they conform to the Senate's order. Later in the day, around 70 of the feudatories gathered in the Church of Saint Titus, the island's patron saint. They decided to send 3 representatives to the Duke, asking that the tax be suspended until a delegation had appealed to Doge Lorenzo Celsi in the Senate in Venice. Dandolo, however, refused to negotiate and ordered the new tax to be proclaimed to the assembled feudatories, asking them to consent on penalty of death and confiscation of property. The following day, disobedient feudatories stormed the ducal palace and arrested Dandolo and his councillors. Within a week, the revolt spread to the rest of the island, and the commanders of the main cities were substituted by men loyal to the insurgents. Marco Gradenigo the Elder was appointed governor and rector of the whole island. The figure of Saint Titus was selected as the emblem of the newly established commune of Crete. Greeks were admitted to the Grand Council and the Council of Feudatories, and restrictions concerning the ordination of Greek priests were abolished. The revolt of Saint Titus was not the first attempt to dispute the Venetian dominion in Crete. Riots fomented by Greek nobles trying to regain the past privileges were frequent, but these did not have the character of a national uprising. However, the revolt of 1363 was unique in that it was initiated by the colonists themselves, who later allied with the Greeks of the island. Being a state colony, Crete featured a fiscal administration imposed over both the Latin and the indigenous population, thus creating the potential of a sympathy and later an alliance between the colonists and those being colonized. This was emphasized further by the fact that at the time of the revolt, settlers had been living in Crete for 2 or 3 generations, and an acculturation process had made the local culture more familiar to them than that of the homeland Venice. Venetian reaction. News about the revolt reached Venice in early September. Crete being one of its major overseas possessions, the Senate considered the revolt to be a serious threat to its security. comparable to that posed by Genoa, its traditional enemy. Such was the concern on the issue that the authority for dealing with it passed from the Senate to the more powerful College. The first reaction of Venice was to attempt a reconciliation and send a delegation to Candia, expressing the hope that the colonists would again become faithful to the Republic of Venice. After the failure of this attempt, Venice proceeded to organize an army to suppress the revolt. Requests for help were sent to Pope Urban V, the Doge of Genoa, Joan of Naples, Peter I of Cyprus, Louis I of Hungary, John V Palaeologus, and the Grand Master of the Knights Hospitaller in Rhodes. Most responded positively, expressing their support and issuing decrees that instructed their subjects to refrain from making any contact or providing any aid to the insurgents on Crete. The Venetian government assigned the leadership of the army it was assembling to the Veronese condottiero Lucino d'Alverme. In anticipation of the Venetian army, the insurgents had begun to argue on the best way to proceed. Eventually, they settled for sending a delegation to Genoa, asking for assistance and offering it control of Crete. However, the Genoese kept their promise of neutrality and refused to intervene, forcing the delegation to depart Genoa empty-handed. The Venetian expeditionary fleet sailed from Venice on April 10, carrying foot soldiers, cavalry, mine sappers and siege engineers. On the 7th of May 1364, and before the delegation to Genoa had returned to Candia, the Venetian forces invaded Crete, landing on the beach of Pagliacastro. They marched east towards Candia and, facing little resistance, they succeed in recapturing the city on May 10. Marco Gradenigo the Elder and two of his councillors were executed, while most of the rebel leaders fled to the mountains. Having secured Candia, Venetian forces took punitive actions to ensure that another revolt would not happen. Rewards for the capture of the fugitive insurgents were announced. Those having participated in the revolt were banished from living in any Venetian territory and the properties were confiscated. News of the victory reached Venice in June 1364 and was greeted with prolonged celebrations in the Piazza San Marco, which, as poet Petrarch described in a letter, included mock battles, banquets, games, races and jousts. After the revolt, a new official, the Capitanius, was appointed in Crete with the duty of protecting the Venetian dominion against any internal or foreign enemy. Rebellion of the Colleges. The recapture of the principal cities did not signal the pacification of Crete, despite the fact that the Latin leadership of the revolt had fallen apart. Several feudatories were still hiding in the mountains and a significant portion of the Greek nobility, supported by Greek peasants, continued to harass the Venetian forces and settlers. The strongest resistance was instigated by the Greek Colleges noble family, who resided in the western part of the island. They carried the insignia of the Byzantine Emperor of Constantinople and proclaimed that the struggle was for the Orthodox faith and for freedom from Latin rule. Soon, the entire western part of Crete was in the hands of the insurgents, forcing the Venetian authorities to mount yet another major campaign against them. At the Doge's request, the Pope declared the war against the insurgents a crusade, promising remission of sins to those offering to fight in or support the war in Crete. The insurgents, however, managed to extend the domination further east, gaining control of most of the countryside. Eventually, it was only in 1368 and after several attempts that the resistance was shattered and the Venetian rule was consolidated over the entire island.